Welcome everyone, this is Monique from Cosmic Alchemy, and today I want to talk about the upcoming transit of the year, or so it's proclaimed. And we're talking about this Saturn-Neptune conjunction that we are going to see this February. It's very, very soon. And I want to look at it from a very specific angle. And I think one that a lot of astrologers out there have talked about already. But I want to go actually into depth into this very particular topic because I feel like there is quite a little bit of misinformation out there, maybe misunderstanding, and maybe some astrologers are taking it personally. I don't know. So, um, if you see me looking down, I have notes here because if I didn't have notes and I prepared them today and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna I'm gonna talk for hours if I don't take notes. And so the the thing I want to start off with is first of all to give you a little disclaimer. For people who don't know me and who don't know my story, they may not know how long I've actually been in the spiritual realms and in the metaphysical realms and all of these kind of things. I don't want to talk about my story today, but everything you hear about from me has been because of one, lived experience, two, and I mean lived experience mostly also in the very places that are very known for the cultural backgrounds of different spiritual practices. I have, in the past 20 years, traveled extensively. I traveled to 45 countries. I have lived in 10 of them. And I left my home country basically 12 years ago. And although I'm currently back for the very first time in that country, which is so strange to me, it's like a very alienated experience. But I guess that's part of the whole evolution process. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that Um, it's probably also my Saturn in the 12th house speaking when I speak about spirituality from a very lived experience place and not necessarily from an academic and scholarly place. I do know about the different traditions and scriptures and have studied some of them. And when I say studied some of them, I do not mean that I've extensively read them or went down rabbit holes in that way. What I mean is actually, when I say studied, that I have lived in the countries known for these scriptures and traditions and spiritual practices. And I've talked to the people who live them day by day by day, in and out. I've lived around them for many years. And I've studied it in a way that literally comes back to lived experience. Yes, I would go to readings where scriptures are being read, and I would go what's called, for example, monk chats, where you would go to uh, a day of experience into traditional temples. You would meet the monks, you would do meditation practices, you would learn all about a very specific topic from, for example, the Buddhist tradition, and then you would be able to talk about it and you would be able to ask questions. And that's what I mean when I say studied. So I wanted to give this disclaimer because other people may come from a very scholarly or academic background, or when they say they study things, they literally mean they study all the scriptures, and then live by those scriptures, and that is not my experience. And I will also say that the experience that I've personally made over the last 20 years that I travel the world is that most of the people, and when I say most, it's probably 95% of the people who study these scriptures and study these traditions and everything, they do not live by those scriptures on a day-to-day basis in this current world. They are they're adapting what uh, the scriptures say to their current circumstances. And so if you're a monk and your life is to live in a temple, you have a very different circumstance and you can actually live by those scriptures. Whether you do it or not is a different question, but you can. Versus someone who lives, for example, in a Buddhist country and has work, or they have their own business, or they go to college and everything, they will not have the time and the environment on a daily basis uh, to live as the scriptures would pertain, and so they adapt that to the daily life. Okay, actually, we're drifting so far off already from what I wanted to say, but I want to give these disclaimers because actually we are not drifting off. This is actually we are already getting right into the deep end. But I feel that the conversation about spirituality often is, are you spiritual enough or not? And I don't think that's actually a question to ask. I don't think you can judge spirituality by whether or not you're meditating, um, or whether or not you are journaling. That is not a sign of whether you're spiritual or not. I have met way more deeply spiritual people who have never meditated in their lives, never done a journal practice, but are deeply spiritual in their nature and in how they treat other people and in how they live their lives, versus some of the people who do nothing else but meditating and journaling and breath working and doing Western yoga activities or aerobics, um, and they have in what I experienced as spirituality and seen myself not much to do with what spirituality is about. And that's one of the first things I want to get into. Um, but before I do that, one last disclaimer. One of the things that is one of my lived experiences, or twice actually, is that I have died previously. One was a clinical death with a cardiac arrest. I was 19 years old, and the other one was during a surgery in 2022. And both of these times, I left my body and I went to different spiritual realms, different dimensions. And I have both of the times made different experiences and how, like, what dimensions I went in, what my experience was there. But at the essence, both of the times I experienced a true spiritual essence and true spiritual nature in this whole experience, and the difference between what our soul is and what spirit is and what consciousness is and what our awareness is. And hence, I'm speaking from a place of this um, lived experience versus what you may read in books or what you may what you may experience, um, yeah, what you may read in books or what you may been told from a guru or a teacher or something like this. Yeah. This is also not to say one is better than the other. This is not one is superior than the other. This is just where I come from and where I stand and where my viewpoint is at, so that you can make a better judgment or better discernment, not necessarily judgment, but a better discernment how you interact with what I say and what you take from it. That's really what these disclaimers are about, to be honest. Okay, so let's get into it. The exact conjunction is on Friday, February 20th, so not long to go, at 5:54 p.m. Central European Time. Since I'm in Europe, you get Central European Time, and it's going to be at 0 degrees and 45 minutes Aries. So I want to start with what is actually spirituality? And we're gonna roll from there. So I talked a little bit about it already, but what is spirituality and what is not? Personally, from my point of view, I believe that spirituality really is about finding meaning, finding purpose, and a sense of connection to something greater than yourself. And for example, the universe. Uh, I I find my connection with the universe. So I call everything that is greater than myself and the connection that I want to to build for myself, the universe. I do not call it God. I do not call it the divine, but you can use all of these words, um, and you can also use whatever else you believe in. I personally see spirituality disconnected from organized religion. That is also more of a personal opinion. Um, you can find spirituality in religious faith. I also believe religious faith is disconnected from organized religion, but as a whole nother topic, and I'm sure I'll make a video about that at some point. Um, and I personally believe that spirituality has nothing to do with whether or not you know any of the scriptures, any of the traditions, um, any of the practices necessarily. And I'm not saying those practices are bad. Again, this is not a judgment. I personally just dis I personally feel that it's often way too heavy to say, like, if you're not doing meditation, you can't be spiritual. This is way too simplified. You can live a very spiritual life as a poor, um, uneducated person who has not the means and also not the education or maybe not the access to information about practices like meditation or like journaling or like mindfulness even, and still intuitively live very spiritual without having to sit down every day on a yoga cushion and meditating for an hour. And um, this is my fundamental belief about spirituality. And what I believe spirituality is not is what we have seen rising in the last um, was it 14, 15 years with Neptune and Pisces, really the rise of the appropriating wellness, uh, healing spiritual industry. So, uh, the yoga exercises that you've seen on Instagram, because yoga really is a life philosophy and it has only very little to do with those aerobic exercises you do see on Instagram. Um, and while they're a part of the philosophy, they're not yoga. Um, what is not spirituality is uh, practicing mindfulness and meditation, but judging others whether or not they're spiritual based on whether or not they're practicing meditation and journaling or not. Um, and you can be extremely spiritual and be on the forefront on of activism right now. Yeah. There's no separation of the two. It's very much possible. In fact, I believe it's very spiritual to fight for your neighbor's rights and for your fellow human beings' freedom. Yeah. So I really believe that, you know, it's at the core of spirituality is really this desire or this drive to want to evolve and also um, serve for the greater good. And when I mean serve, it doesn't need to be necessarily that you become an influencer and you share all of this information, or you're becoming a healer, or it doesn't, sometimes serving the greater good means that uh, you are a cashier in a supermarket, but your spirituality means that you are treating everyone with this immense kindness and you're basically making their days better. And because they're meeting you, you're uplifting them in this very simple yet very effective way. And that really is how I see spirituality embodied and lived. Um, yes, and so what I think spirituality is not is those the very uh at the very core, very greedy, very selfish, very very mm, probably also self-absorbed type of performance that in the last like 14 years have been put on display with, for example, I'm gonna use yoga as an example. I'm so sorry, but don't get me wrong, but it's the example, okay? So since those yoga exercises have been separated from the philosophy and introduced into the Western world, and they have become this, I don't know, this picture of wellness and well-being and enlightenment. But really, if you were able to see behind it, it was cultural appropriation. It was and not all of it, but most of it was cultural appropriation. Um, it was greed. It was it was disconnection because again, most of the Western yoga practices that have been taught were only those aerobic exercises, very disconnected from the whole yoga philosophy. If you do not learn yoga philosophy with the exercise together, what's the point, right? And so you can see how this was way more performance because what we've seen, at least in the Western world, is a lot was, the perfect picture and the perfect breathing and the perfect this and the perfect that, and suddenly everyone had to have those yoga pants and the yoga and huge greedy industries were just picking up on it, and well, here we are. So. I personally believe that is not at all what spirituality is and what spirituality is about, and how spirituality is embodied. Now, when we look at Neptune going into Aries, which happened, I forgot the exact date, but it was like about a week ago. And we gonna see that spirituality um, will be, instead of this whole dreamy, shiny, delulu kind of spirituality, the bypassing, the how far and big can we go, and how yeah, how dreamy can it be? I think we're now gonna see much more embodied, right? We're gonna see more action-based spirituality in terms of really the embodiment of spiritual practices. And when I say spiritual practices, I personally mean, how do you live in a spiritual um, framework, your day-to-day life? Yeah. You don't have to sit down and meditate an hour a day if you have a full-time job and three kids and maybe chronic illness. And a lot of us, especially now after this huge wave of new autoimmune disease and chronic illness, and that hit especially women, um, there's going to be so many people who will, first of all, not have the capacity to sit down and meditate and do breath work. Second of all, and please hear me out on that, this is not good for everyone. Yes, I totally understand. Uh, all all the people who really want to sell it are gonna tell you like it is, but it really is not. If you know a little bit about the nervous system, about neurological um, makeup of the body, and about the background of what chronic illness looks like and so on, then it can, not will, it may be harmful to you. It may actually put you even more into a fight flight um, situation versus down regulating you. Meditating for neurodivergent people could put them totally over the edge because the focus is way too much on the head versus on the body and the somatic experiences and the senses that we need to focus on more, instead of our head where everything is already way too loud and too bright and too smelly too much and too overstimulating. So please know that there will be practices for everyone, but it's not anymore the one who screams the loudest and who has the most beautiful posts on Instagram, but the ones who are going to be the people who, it's now like show not tell time, I feel like. And so it's not anymore about who has the best marketing, who is the biggest guru, who is the greatest Instagram influencer, but the people who have done it forever, who have actually the background information, who also probably have some science background. And when I say science, you don't have to be the new physicist on at Harvard. I mean that you know how to uh, do proper research. I do not mean Google and ChatGPT, okay? Let's be clear. Um, but who do scientific research, yeah? Licensed clinicians who, yes, they also can do harm, like everyone, okay? Let's just disclaim, everyone can do harm, but you gotta find the people who embody the very things that you need. So, for example, if you're neurodivergent, let's say you're autistic, and you need therapy, you don't want to go anymore to a therapist who is neither autistic themselves, nor do they have neuro-affirming practices and any information or education and trauma information on autism. Like, the time is over that we're going to just listen to anyone, because now it's about embodying it, it ourselves. Yeah. And Aries is about the I am, and also about like fast action. So with Saturn joining the whole thing, we're gonna have to make sure that we're slowing down a little bit and not jumping too fast any into any new things, yeah? So take your time and make sure you're discerning properly. Make sure that you're going to listen to yourself, listen to your body, listen to your intuition, your gut response, listen to what works. And sometimes that means you will have to trial and error for a little bit, yeah? So if you have been able to, let's make a really funny example. If you've just been eating bread all your life and you feel like maybe bread isn't what I should be eating, and you leave it out for 2, 3 months because it takes a while until our system is recalibrating, and suddenly you feel like, oh my God, I feel so much better. Listen to yourself. You are your own best teacher. You know your body best. You know best how you feel. No one else can tell you. And this is not to say you should do any science experiences, okay? So discernment. Yeah. Okay. And this also brings me to the next point of how our outlook on spirituality may change. I am a big believer, and I've talked about it for many years now, actually, that this is the end of the guru era. We are going to stop listening to gurus and teachers and wannabe um, practitioners who don't actually have real degrees. And we're going to be done with them. Not only that, but they're going to fall from their thrones pretty harshly, I would say. And look at what just came out, and it came out a few months ago, but I don't think the outrage was there at all. But look at Deepak Chopra, who's in the Epstein files, and not just named, but it's it's bad. Yeah, it's bad. And who is Deepak Chopra? He has been one of the most proclaimed spiritual gurus. He talked a lot about the divine feminine and tried to, tell us all about who we should be as women and who we shouldn't be. And that's also a thing, and I'm talking to the woman now here. Stop listening to men in your world. I I know this is gonna be I'm gonna get so much hate for that, but it's gotta say we're gonna start descender men. because it has never done anything good for us in the sense. And look, when I'm saying this, I don't mean if you're a teenager listening to me, don't listen to your dad. I'm not saying this, yeah? This is absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is that if you're a grown woman and all you do is listening to entry-level manosphere bros like Stephen Bartlett on the Diary of the CEO, or who are these other names? Chris Williamson, who are telling women they should birth more babies so men aren't lonely anymore. What are we doing? There are so many brilliant women in this world, and it's time we're listening to them, we're reading their books, and especially brown, black, and indigenous women who have done the work for such a long time. If you want to start somewhere, start with Bell Hooks' books, right? She has been writing and writing forever about these very topics. But I really believe it's time to be our own guru, our own teacher, and less following traditions and scriptures. And I'm saying this, and I know that people are going to be so outraged, but it's time we're leaving all of these scriptures and traditions behind that are thousands of years old because our world simply doesn't work like this anymore. And I will have to I will have to talk about this other stuff in this regards to the organized religions video. But really what I'm trying to say is do not throw out the beneficial lessons you get from reading those scriptures, yeah? But start applying them and adapting them to our time now. Let's not let's not use them as a means to uh, excuse certain behavior. We are way past this time that we can use scriptures, books, Bibles, whatever, to excuse behavior, to excuse gender violence, to excuse homophobia, transphobia, any of these things, racism. This is done. It is done. And I think now is the time when Saturn and Neptune go into Aries together that we're going to really see more of this. And it's going to come to light because in one of my favorite card decks, the Dragonfly card, uh, the phrase on the Dragonfly card, and it's from I have it here in front of me. It's from Colette Baron Reed, the Spirit Animal Oracle. Okay, and she has a Dragonfly card, and this card says truth transcends illusion. And it's the perfect card for it because the dragonfly, some dragonfly species, I don't know if you knew, some dragonfly species, their um, larvae underwater will stay underwater for up to 4 years. 4 years underwater in a larvae, okay? And they have no idea that they are going to turn out into this beautiful dragonfly with wings and sparkly, reflecting, beautiful decoration and in this all of these colors. They have no freaking idea they are larvae for over 4 years. In a lifespan of a dragonfly, do you know how long 4 years are? But the truth transcends illusion because this dragonfly is going to come out one day, sit on a stone to dry off the wings and the body and to harden them out, and then suddenly they're rising from the muddy darkness of the lake and lifting up into the sky and they can see everything from above and suddenly they see the truth, everything. And just like that, Saturn is a planet like this. Saturn brings the truth to our very eyes, but it's gonna take time. It's gonna take time because uh, the truth is oftentimes not seen in the moment. It's only connected in hindsight. And so we have to be a little bit patient with that. We have to, uh, we have to be able to follow our own guidance and find our own guidance within. And so, in order for truth to transcend illusion, we're going to have to stop listening to gurus and teachers and people who want to be a self-proclaimed leader or, you know, why do you want to be a self-proclaimed leader? Why do you like that's the difference between wanting to be a self-proclaimed leader or guru or teacher or being a servant for the people who then may follow your servings, if that kind of makes sense. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that, and a lot of that will change also in terms of spirituality. And yeah. Okay. This is Berkeley. I feel like that was really important to talk about that. So I really would love to know what you think about it all so far. Leave me a comment down below. And don't forget to be kind because uh, if you have nothing nice to say, just don't say it. And I don't mean don't criticize me, but if you have any feedback or if you have a difference or you disagree with me, say it in a kind way. You don't need to be a dick or an asshole here, okay? Cool. Okay, so um I want to move on because otherwise we're going to talk here forever, and this can happen with me for sure. So what is spiritual bypassing? Spiritual bypassing is there's a few different ways. So I have seen spiritual bypassing way too often, I cannot tell you. Especially in places where spiritual communities have been very dense in a way where a lot of people from around the world have come to live specifically for spiritual development. And so I mean places like Bali, of course, Tulum, Kopanjan in Thailand, um, Tulum in Mexico, by the way. Or even places like there are places in Australia where you can find things like that. And you can find it all around the world. Of course, in India, you will find places like that. Um, but the places that I mentioned now, they're very, very dense, you know? So, anyways, spiritual bypassing is if you use spirituality to avoid or escape uh, from deep emotional wounds or deep inner work that you may need to do because of hardship or because of trauma or things like that, and hard, difficult issues in personal life. So you could have, maybe you made a lot of mistakes and now you have troubles with your family. And you're basically using spirituality to run away from that or to avoid dealing with it. Um, Spiritual bypassing is also if you if you create like a bubble around yourself in order to not have to deal with reality and greater societal issues, which I have seen. Woo, it's scary. For example, and that has always tripped me up a lot. Um, I have heard so many times like that racism isn't real and that love and light can heal the world if everyone just love and lights racism away. Um, really, really difficult because also those very people were a lot of the people who were extremely racist, but I digress. Uh, Using spirituality to flee from our greater social responsibilities to each other as human beings living in a society. And I chose the example. I'm sorry, people, but look, uh, I just want to, small disclaimer again. If I use these examples and maybe you're someone who is in a situation like this right now, just know I've been there, okay? And I may have done also things like this, and that's how I learned from them. And the most important thing is that we can acknowledge and also see when we're in a pattern like this and then do the work to change it, right? So, uh, the example I meant from, fleeing from greater social responsibilities to each other as human beings is, for example, moving to Bali to become a yoga teacher, but refusing to learn the language, give back to local land and people, exploiting local spaces and folks, perpetuating harm and appropriate another culture for likes and money. And 95% of the people there. And worse, worse. The sexual abuse going on in these spaces, the violence that goes on in these spaces, the extreme manipulation and abuse that goes on if you refuse to join these spaces and um, join their cult-like behavior, it's just wild. And that's again not just Bali, but Bali is a very prevalent place for these kind of things. Um, so how does spiritual bypassing look like in times of great social change? Like right now, we're in a huge transformation time, and you know. I always say it's like the darkest before the dawn. And I mean, it feels like it's just dark right now, isn't it? And so I often feel, from what I see right now, is that spiritual bypassing right now looks a lot like misusing or misinterpreting spiritual scriptures, traditions, or teachings to find an excuse why someone doesn't want to take a side. Um, and refusing to name right or wrong. And to me, that is a lot like if you're neutral in a situation of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If you use your spirituality, and that's what I meant also previously, like with we have to let go of the literal meaning of these scriptures and traditions. We have to adapt it to our times. If you're looking in the world right now, and it doesn't matter if you look to Iran, Palestine, Ukraine, Sudan, Congo, Syria, Myanmar, Minneapolis, it doesn't matter where you look at. And you say, you don't know what's right or wrong, what's the right side of history or the wrong side of history. Um, you don't know like, you don't know what side you kind of want to be on because you feel like it's complicated, then to me, and yes, it's surely a personal opinion, but don't we all just have personal opinions on the internet? Then to me, this is a matter of spiritual bypassing and also siding with the oppressors. Because if you're trying to stay neutral, just so you wouldn't pick sides, because your spirituality, your scripture taught you that there is no right or no wrong. This is not what the right side and wrong side of history meets. And that's what I mean with not being literal in translating these scriptures into our times today. Um, yeah, I I could deep dive into Iran here right now, but I don't want to, because I think I made my point quite well. And I also believe we have as a soul, as a spiritual being in this human flesh suit, call it what you want. I believe we have a moral and an ethic responsibility to our fellow spiritual beings in all of those flesh suits. Because after all, we all bleed red. We all have to discard our waste in the same way. But also, we are all souls. We are all spiritual beings. And it doesn't matter what form we have chosen to look like and live life and be like and whatever. So if we leave the world and we leave this body, we're all going to go back to the same place. And do you want to meet everyone and then say, like, sorry, I didn't choose to be on your side? Like, I don't know. Don't take this so literal, okay? That's, but I don't think we're gonna meet all in the same place again. At least, oh, I don't want to meet some of y'all. Not you all, but I don't want to meet those orange clowns right now. I don't know. Anyways, but what I mean with that is, like, I believe we have a responsibility. I believe that we came here all to evolve and to find meaning outside of us and to go through this human experience. And one of the number one things that a soul is trying to obtain is freedom, isn't it? But none of us are free until we're all free. So how do we even go about wanting to obtain freedom? Like, let's talk a little bit in, like, scripture language, right? If you follow scriptures and you want to become enlightened, how do you want to become enlightened if you're not able to side with the people, the very people who are being oppressed right now? And if you're not fighting against the oppressors that are doing all of these atrocities, all of this evil shit, how are you going to become enlightened? Because if you do not fight against this evil, you are loading your karma in some ways or form. Because again, no action and being neutral is siding with the oppressor. And I'm not saying, I want to make this very clear. You don't have to go out and scream on social media and be super loud or write about it. You don't have to go and be on the front lines of the protests or activism. You don't have to go and be on stages and be visible in this sense. But what I truly believe, spirituality at the core is asking us to do in this sense is to help everyone else become free. And we're not helping everyone else to become free if the only way you're using spirituality is for yourself, and if you're using spirituality to excuse yourself from your responsibility to help others become free. Yeah. And so there are so many different roles that can be filled in a society that need helps to be freed from oppressors. It could be you could fundraise, you could write, you can do art and music, you can help people with healing and nervous system release, and you can uh, you can be a journalist and a reporter. You can be the activist on the front line. You can be the person who brings relief. But what we cannot do is do all of that without acknowledging what's going on in the world, how the systems work against us, and especially about against Black, Indigenous people of color, and against certain religious groups as well. We cannot do this work if we are not acknowledging the very limitations that are being put in place from the oppressors. And that is what I believe is spiritual bypassing at the core. If we're pretending everyone has the same opportunities, everyone has the same starting point, everyone has the same privileges, and that is just not real. And we need to name it. And if you cannot name it, and if you cannot acknowledge it, and if you cannot work through your own biases and your own conditioning, then how are we gonna become enlightened personally and as a society or as a people? My dog's looking at me like, yeah. Right, Latte? What do you think about that? Right? Yeah. So I want to end with that because it's become a much longer video than I anticipated. And the only thing I want to say is because I said you do not have to be on social media. If you are an influencer, if you have a platform, if you make money off the internet, it's my personal opinion, take it or leave it, my personal opinion that we have a responsibility to use these platforms for this very liberation and to speak up. And yes, you probably lose followers, but don't you worry, you gain other people that are with you in this fight, okay? And you will see that you're becoming way more strengthened in your work as well. But what I believe we cannot do is be, and it's also what I think is going to come out in Saturn-Neptune conjunction. We cannot be one person in the walls of our home and another person online. I think it's going to blow up for the very people who are not speaking up and out about who they truly are and what they truly believe. And I believe it's gonna backfire. And I think Saturn is gonna call in the Neptunian uh, disillusionment, illusions, and saying, what is it? What are you really behind? Tell me the truth. And I hope you're doing that. And I hope you show up as your true self, no matter how this looks like. And I hope that you appreciate me showing up as my true self. And having said that, that's it for today. Don't forget to stay weird and see you next time.